the second person we've got for our keynote session is Zenda Ofir. And Zenda actually, she has a very kind of grounded strength that really puts me in the mindset of understanding why this transformative evaluation is so important, because it has that sense of, I don't know, like holding and confidence, and I think that comes through with Zenda as well. Zenda is an international evaluation expert and a visionary, and she's going to speak to us about kind of the potential of evaluation in these transformative fields, and how we can kind of have a more radically reimagine what evaluation can do. So it can actually be something very powerful and something that kind of drives change and not kind of a post hoc activity at the end. So Zenda's worked globally. She's worked in Africa, Asia, the Global South, advising on major institutions how to embed evaluation into complex change processes. And she's going to argue that evaluation doesn't have to be bureaucratic. It can be critical, it's often misunderstood in practice. So I'm really excited to learn from Zenda today. Can I invite Zenda to the front?
Good morning. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you, especially because I appreciate so much people who are trying to make the world a better place. So thank you for having me here. Just let's take a moment to appreciate those two quotes. About 8 years ago, I wrote my first blog post, and it was about evaluation as a beautiful practice. And I was reminded of this by these quotes, because evaluation is about doing good. It's about making visible some of our most treasured capabilities as humans. It forces us to engage with reality as we see it from different perspectives. It has to empower. If it doesn't, it's not good evaluation. And it's rooted in something that comes across naturally. And this is very important. Evaluation is deeply embedded in all of us. If you remember Daniel Kahneman in his famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow, The Two Systems of Thinking, if you analyze it, you will find that system one is evaluation automatically based on emotion and association. System two is deliberately using logic and innovation. So evaluating really is a natural thought process that we all have, and we display it every single day. It really is a primary strategy through which people adjust to their world. And systematic professional evaluation practice is really just the institutional embodiment of our thinking processes. It's been with us for thousands of years. The first examples of systematic evaluation was found in societies around the world between 2,000 and 6,000 years ago. I wrote a blog post about that if you want to know more. But contemporary evaluation has been firmly rooted in Western thought. It has been evolving, and it's been evolving in good ways. The initial conceptualization of evaluation was very much focused on, after World War II's destruction, on getting things back and being accountable for money spent doing that. And then there was public management policy work that was done, especially in North America, Europe, and later on in Australia. And the thinking, the theory, and the practice was really driven by the thought processes and the needs of that time. And it took a long time for evaluation to evolve beyond that. There were some thinkers who said, well, it should not just be about accountability, it should be about much more than that. Learning came in later, the engagement of values much later, the engagement of different voices even later. It started, therefore, and continued to be somewhat linear, reductionist, projectized, all very destructive for the kind of spaces in which I work, which is primarily development in the global south, and also I do half of my work on the evaluation of research programs, strategies, and institutions and networks. So the kind of thinking that has been reigning evaluation until quite recently has not been what we need. The oldest definition of evaluation, contemporary evaluation, is the systematic process of determining the merit, the worth, or the value of something. That was, I think, a definition from the 1960s or so. I like to see it as it's something that is judgment, well, informing, values-grounded practice that enables wise and timely action before things get out of hand in the wrong direction. And it is always political, whether it's at institutional level, national level, global level. It's always political. It is not just a technical effort. I always say we are not mechanics. We are far more than that. And it is important to recognize that one must be politically very savvy if you want to be an evaluator. There is something that I want to draw your attention to. We white people tend to like to think that our world is the world, and the way we think is the way everybody thinks. This is, of course, I'm sure I don't need to tell most of you, it is incredibly wrong. So in the last 25 years, especially the last 15 years, indigenous African and Eastern perspectives have started to influence the way in which evaluation is conceptualized. And can you see the difference between the earlier thinking and what's written there now, right? There is a focus on learning together. In fact, there are some indigenous societies that do not accept evidence that is so-called independent or objective, which doesn't really exist in our world anymore. But they say that if evidence was not developed with me, where I was part of it, it is not credible. So it's a current agency to learn together, to focus on what truly matters for those who are affected, not just the funders or the commissioners of the evaluation, right? It's the collective discernment with the actions, relationships, and outcomes nurture the well-being of all beings across generations, right? Alive through the rhythms of life and change, where people see time as cyclical, for example, and causality takes on a very different meaning to what we have, as we've studied this in the West, project. Honoring ancestral wisdoms and maintaining harmony with the interconnected web of life. So when you look at evaluation frameworks developed in some of these societies, it contains these elements, right? And the questions that one asks as an evaluator look very different. Contemporary evaluation is not research. Many people think it is just a form of research. We use research, of course, but there's a real difference. Evaluative practice has a systematic approach, and it really connects the design of interventions to evaluation questions. And evaluation questions is what it's all about. What is it that we want to know that is evaluative, that we develop together, usually in a participatory way? Of course, depending on who's around the table, that will influence what the questions are like, but everything hinges on what you want to know. And then there are many different designs and methodologies that are translated, that one can choose from. You choose, that's translated into criteria, standards, and measures. Not indicators so much anymore, but rubrics. Rubrics are little vignettes that you can put ratings to them and build up from poor to very good. And it combines a number of qualitative and quantitative measures that reflect the criteria and standards by which you want to evaluate, right? And underpinning all of that is evaluative thinking and evaluative reasoning that provides the logic. And this must be transparent to all, so that if somebody wants to understand how findings and conclusions and recommendations were arrived at, you will be able to see that from what is presented, right? So that logic must be clear. And you can ask, whose logic? Well, that makes for interesting debates. what is very important is over the last 20 years, with the influence of the global south coming through very strongly, especially, evaluation has evolved from a post-hoc or after the fact, or maybe in the middle of a period of 5 years, or maybe at the beginning. It has evolved into something that has to be useful at any time for any intervention. Intervention can be some strategy activities, it's initiatives that are trying to change something, right? For any kind of intervention. And very importantly, something I believe in very strongly is because it's inherent in all of us and because we can use somebody to guide us in a systematic process of self-reflection, self-evaluation. It doesn't need to be somebody who comes and imposes what they think on you, right? It's for you, your own empowerment. They can be internal people. For example, I worked for 6 years with a Bill and Melinda Gates funded program across 13 African countries developing African women scientists. And I worked with them very, very regularly to embed within both the management team and all the participants an understanding of how to evaluate and how to think about external as well as internal self-evaluation. Right? So you can, depending on the need, depending on what you want, you can bring people in or not, you can do it yourself. It has merit in every single instance depending on what you want to achieve. Evaluation questions is very, very, as I said, the basis. And the questions are always formulated like, how well, right? To what extent? How sustainable or relevant or important? How good? Is it good enough? How better, right? What changes, what impacts are achieved, positive and negative, which people often forget. Looking at just the positive impact is a waste of time. You have to look at what's negative and then look at the balance between the two and see if you're still doing good. And so on, right? But the point is, evaluation questions is what determines what is done. And we never just reflect on questions to answer them on the surface. There are layers of detailed questions below the important ones. And then, very important, we need to, in order to make any assessment, any judgment, you delve deeply. Why this situation, right? Under what circumstances will this change take place, and has it taken place? With what resources, with what assumptions and values? For and with whom, from whose perspectives? Who defines progress and success, right? So we need to study all of this, we need to bring it all together. It is not a simple matter, especially when you deal with people from many different cultures. And this is something that is very interesting to me because I had to test myself in evaluations, and I find this is the kind of thinking we have to do when we do evaluative thinking. These are aligned ways of thinking or subsystems of thinking, right? And all of this is what we need to bring to the table. And these days, systemic thinking, integrative, holistic thinking, relational thinking, understanding how things connect and people connect and nature. Practical thinking, because it has to be immediately relevant for practice, what we do. Immediately, evaluations for immediate use. Reflective thinking, right, for learning and other purposes. And of course, now very new in our practice is anticipatory thinking, futures thinking, where in a time of uncertainty we cannot predict, as was in the past, you will get these outcomes in 5 years and we will hold you accountable for that. That time is over, right? So now it's much more dealing with uncertainty, and as Mick said, within the big picture that we all operate, we need to understand the dynamics that will influence us and that we in turn will influence. And so anticipatory futures thinking is becoming increasingly important and something that I personally have delved in for many years. The point is, appropriate methods are not a problem. My PhD was in ecological chemistry. Some of you may know a periodic table of elements. Is there anybody who knows periodic table of elements? Any chemist? Oh, quite a few. So this is the periodic table of evaluation. And it's something that I really like. But the point here is not the detail. The point is to show how many purposes, how many types of questions. We have millions, exaggeration, but we have so many methods, methodologies, approaches for everything, right? This is not our problem. I think we kind of, John is looking at me, I'd love to know if he agrees, but we have certainly enough tools and instruments that we can deal with the kind of work that's needed now. The point is, what I've sketched to you up to now is kind of the evolution of evaluation without going into too much detail. But I do want to now focus on the journey that we're on now. This is all about the journey that I do within my field, right? And this liminal time of what is past and the world that has not yet emerged. We are in that time, right? The time of not yet. I believe that in this time, evaluation and transformation specialists have to work together to address the polycrisis. I don't think that we have a choice. And I'd love to convince you that your role in evaluation and vice versa could really make a difference and help accelerate what one does if it's well applied. Because now evaluation is becoming what we call navigational wisdom. It is still a values-driven practice. So the values, do you care about gender, about intersectionality? Do you care about the environment? Do you connect your values into your practice? That weave systematic monitoring, judgment, learning into a coherent, context-aware process for navigating complexity, using evidence, developing evidence, informing decisions and helping to accelerate equitable transformations. And of course, it surfaces things that often remain hidden. You know, power, values, relationships, mindsets, value. The point is that it offers the possibility to guide transformative systems change during this time of deep uncertainty. When you think of evaluation questions, I don't know how we can exist without those questions if we want to do well. One needs them answered. Probably the most advanced contribution in recent years is done by, I counted at least 5 people in this room who participated in this. And I believe this is up to this moment the most advanced piece of work on transformation-focused evaluation. It brought together several hundred, Sam, the lead author, is here, you probably know him. Several hundred pieces of literature, pulled it together and identified from their 12 principles that make for transformation-focused evaluation. And we had a walkthrough yesterday, which was lovely, through campus, discussing this. And something that came up is, yes, it is complex. It is complex. The world is complex, our practice is complex. Working with transformation is complex. And I get irritated by people who constantly want to simplify everything until it's too simplistic, right? So somewhere there's a balance between the complexity that we have to deal with and the level at which we have simplified so that it's not simplistic, but it's manageable, right? And so this remains a challenge for us, including in these 12 principles, but I recognize them across my practice. If you want to take time and read 87 very well-crafted pages, then please go and read this paper to understand what transformation-focused evaluation is. I also want to quickly point out that evaluation connects to transformation in several useful ways, and we need to be very precise in what we mean when we talk about stuff, the nexus between evaluation and transformation. In the first place, the one that most people associate with evaluation is the assessment of whether systems are shifting. Are we getting transformative change? Right? It's a measuring of transformation or progress towards transformation. But the one that we really focus on these days is evaluation for transformation, which is evaluation that supports transformation by being part of the transformation process, embedded in it, guiding where we can using our evaluative thinking and practice throughout processes that are trying to inspire and accelerate transformation. Evaluation as transformation is, I think what Mick referred to is also that evaluation can sometimes cause inner transformation when we understand more about the values with which things are done, when we work with processes that actually transform how we think about things, and evaluations can do that. So evaluation can also be transformative for the people who are engaged in it. And finally, the field of evaluation is in transformation at the moment. It's actually in transition, because we are grappling with issues like how to embed systemic thinking, decolonization, how to make sure that we understand what's the difference between system reform, system improvement, system change, and actual transformative change, and how to assess that. So we have many things in place, but it's a continuous journey for us as well. And I would have loved to make an example for you, but there are people like John Colvin, who's sitting over there, who will talk in the next session, who will have examples, especially of evaluation for transformation, which I think will be very valuable for those who want to know more about what is the real essence of what we are trying to do together with people like yourselves. Our evaluation questions are also adjusting, and now we ask, and there are many different examples. I mean, this is just very high level. We can go down to any level of detail. How well are the strategy, program, intervention, design, and implementation approaches informed by relevant systems and complexity insights? Let your eyes drift through these questions. Can you see they take on a different space, a different approach now, right? Are there signals that the patterns in the system, that the system is shifting? So we work with signals. Of course, we can strong signals, and we make judgment on to what extent we are actually contributing to changing policy practices and so on. And then just because I have 2 minutes left now, just very briefly, we have, and we often use systems and complexity-informed methodologies. I was looking at a publication that just came out, the 10 principles to transform economics, right, on which the world is based, which is probably the most important transformation we can have at the moment. And I was slobbering over how to evaluate for that, because we have many tools at our disposal to support that. Developmental evaluation is exactly a book written with a notion that you can use complexity concepts in your practice as you live through the process of transformation with the people who are trying to do that. Right? Real-time evaluation is to make it exactly on time when you need it, very quickly. When it's needed, rapid evaluations, principles-focused evaluation, focus on principles. So you can evaluate principles in many different ways for different purposes and reasons. We use systems and complexity-informed frameworks. This one is by the World Bank's TCLP, which is a learning network of hundreds of program managers running programs, and also people outside. They have 5 dimensions of systems change for transformational climate action that is quite commonly used now. You can look it up. And then the water of systems change, which is very, very useful and famous, tracking whether policies, practices, resource flows, relationships, power dynamics, and especially mental models are shifting. This is an example of the translation of Donella Meadows' 12 leverage points that's been simplified to something that people can understand and that resonates with them. And that's really helpful. The more you have of that, the more the chance of transformation. And then my last slide. I do want to show this, if I may, and that is that those of you who know the Three Horizons, Three Horizons foresight technique, we have recently taken for those of you, I don't have time to explain, but the H2+, Horizon 2+, potential pathways to the future aspirational vision, and we've identified 13 dimensions, 13 qualities, that pathways that have a good chance of supporting transformation have, and we can evaluate against that. We can evaluate initiatives against this. And the more of these are built in, the greater the chance of transformation. So this is the kind of thing where designers as well as evaluators work together and can then work together. Finally, I can't talk about this, but I will write about this in a blog, and there will be examples this afternoon or this morning of evaluation for transformation. I simulated evaluations of the Green Revolution in India and Africa and South Africa's transformation to democracy, and I'll share it in writing. I thought it's more important to take you on this journey with me as background, as context, rather than jump in with a simulated example of how we would approach an exact one. And I really hope to encourage you and to inspire you to come on this journey with us. We need help. We have the International Academy for Evaluation, which is focused on transformation. We are all learning. There are many, many evaluators who are working in this space. We would love to join hands with you. Thank you very much for your time and for the minute.